What happened? Where am I? Wait, is this the Shadow Realm? Oh, I need to get out of here. Halloween is right around the corner. I can't miss it. Wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. This is the deep web. Damn, there's no service. Oh, why did I decide to go with AT&T as my carrier? How am I supposed to get out of here if I can't make a call? Who could have possibly tricked me into banishing myself to the deep web?
Who do you think?
Huh? You're the puppet.
I'm Puppet CreepyPasta, from the Puppet universe. I've been stuck down here for a millennia now.
Well, that's a really long time.
Well, cheers, Captain Obvious. Time works different down here. You know, like the hyperbolic time chamber.
The hyperbolic what now?
You know, from Dragon Ball Z.
Oh, I've never seen that show.
Really? That's kind of surprising coming from you.
Oh, I guess.
Okay, so in Dragon Ball Z, when Goku goes...
Who?
Goku? The one with spiky hair?
Which one with the spiky hair?
The one with the spiky hair and the orange gi.
Which one with the spiky hair and the orange gi?
Look, it doesn't matter. What does matter is time moves faster in here than it does in your realm. Before a day passes in your world, 2,000 years will pass here. Now for me, that's fine. I'm a puppet. I'm made of styrofoam. But you will waste away to nothing before the first night of Cat Halloween is even over.
Oh. So you know about Cat Halloween too, huh? So it really is a thing.
Of course it's a thing, you buffoon. Everyone and their mother knows about Cat Halloween. But that doesn't matter now. Bizarro MCP has trapped you here, and he's looking for a certain spell in your book. If he finds it, you'll be banished from your realm forever. He used his black magic to drag me here from the Puppetverse, and now he's gone and done the same thing to you. Only this time, he plans on assuming your life and destroying your YouTube channel in the process.
My YouTube channel? God, he's gonna do worse than YouTube's already doing. Okay, we can't let him do that. You have to help me.
Oh, I will. Under one condition. It gets so lonely down here. So many destitute, solitary nights by myself. So many evenings alone. By myself. I almost forgot what it was like to know another's company. I too had an MCP back in the Puppetverse. He was made of styrofoam, like me. But he sounded just like you.
Okay, I think I know where this is going.
I need you to scratch an itch for me, MCP. Only then can I help you.
Hey, look, as long as you help me get back to my world...
Excellent. Then let's get started. Wait, what? Wait, what the hell are you doing?
I thought you wanted me to scratch an itch.
Not like that, you sicko. I meant read a story. Just read me a story. Holy cow.
Oh yeah, I can do that. That's it's easy peasy. I'll read your story and we'll forget all about the last 5 minutes.
I would do anything to forget about it. Believe me. Just read the damn thing, for goodness sake.
Oh, I know, just the story. I was gonna read it for my Halloween special on my channel anyway. But, seeing as I'm stuck here, I can read it to you. Jim Jameson grew some of the biggest and most unique pumpkins you'd ever seen. You've probably noticed them online without knowing that they were his. Every Halloween, when websites compete with one another to feature the spookiest content, you'd be hard-pressed not to find one of Jim's mammoth pumpkins carved into some kind of jack-o'-lantern. He was a local celebrity around here before he died, which was pretty sad for the whole town. The circumstances surrounding his death were well understood, but still bizarre and unfortunate. He had been working on trying to grow bigger and bigger pumpkins for shows and for his customers. And he'd been experimenting on the best ways to do it. The new method, which caused his death, was growing them in his greenhouse, suspended in the air by a series of cables. The pumpkins could grow and grow without having the ground to retard any of their progress. The method resulted in enormous, beautifully symmetrical pumpkins. And then one day, as Jim was working in the greenhouse, a pumpkin the size of a small car fell from the ceiling when its cable snapped, broke every bone that he had above his hip, and the rescue workers who extracted him from the mess of blood and pumpkin guts famously said they'd never be able to carve a pumpkin again. Jim had no next of kin, so the property was sold off along with everything on it. I was looking for a place in the area, and after a quick visit, I determined it was the best place for me. Moved in about a year ago. Moving into the home of someone who died, and seeing all their stuff sitting there more or less undisturbed, aside from the refrigerator being cleaned out, a few other maintenance-related things, well, it was a strange experience. At first, it felt a little invasive, going through Jim's belongings. There didn't appear to be anything too valuable. I figured whatever might have been there probably had just gotten taken by whoever cleaned the fridge. What I did find, though, were reams of paper and shelves of notebooks. Jim was a meticulous note-taker. Every possible pumpkin permutation was cataloged, diagrammed, and explained in full. I learned about his cable system, his fertilizer combinations, and even his experimental work. The experiments fascinated me. Jim had seen pictures of fruits and vegetables that had been coaxed into growing into particular shapes, square watermelons, star carrots, that kind of thing. But James' ambitions were greater than simple shapes. He wanted something unique and memorable, something that would put him on the map for more than just, big pumpkins. One of the notebooks was filled with diagrams of a scarecrow-shaped mold in which a pumpkin could be grown. He detailed the various materials he'd need to use, the methods of keeping the pumpkins properly watered, and even the various fertilizers that he'd used at different stages of its growth. Apparently, he'd been working on this experiment since the late 1980s, but with little success. Molds were created and destroyed over the course of the year, with new materials being introduced or rejected, depending on their efficiency. Same with irrigation methods, but fertilizer seemed to be the biggest problem for Jim. The plant wasn't getting the right amount of nourishment as it grew to fill the mold, leading to parts of it dying off and rotting. For decades, he tried. For decades, he failed. Whenever I had spare time, I read Jim's notebooks. I was fascinated by his experimenting and the trials and errors that he went through. I found myself wondering if his works could be published someday. I couldn't imagine anyone being bored by the work that he'd written about so passionately. And early last October, when the farm was turning brown and leaves were turning red, I cracked open a notebook of Jim's from the year that he died. I decided to skip a few because I was so anxious to learn if he had any success with the pumpkin experiment. Now, at this point in his notes, he was writing about hybrid pumpkins, pumpkin acorn, squash hybrids, pumpkin zucchini hybrids, all with the goal of solving the rot problem that had plagued his work. I flipped through the pages of the notebook, skimming the notes, until one word stood out from all the others as if it had been written in red: radiation. I turned back a few pages and was blown away by what I saw. Jim had, over time, purchased and disassembled hundreds of smoke detectors. He was planning to collect the tiny amounts of Americum-241 that they had inside. With wide eyes, I pored over the pages as Jim talked about incorporating the Americum-241 into his fertilizer to introduce mutations into the pumpkins. With each new entry, I saw that Jim began to have successes. He wrote about each complete shaped pumpkin with unbridled enthusiasm. I started to notice a slight disconnect between the scientifically meticulous Jim from before and the potentially irradiated Jim after. I finished that notebook and started the next one. The disconnect continued. More hypotheses about hybridization were detailed, including hybrids with ostriches and slugs and even dinosaurs. I groaned and I dropped the notebook. Poor bastard had gone nuts. I felt pity for the old farmer, and part of me wondered if his death in the greenhouse was purposely self-inflicted. If my mind was going, I might have done the same thing. I didn't read his notes for a couple weeks. On Halloween, feeling bored and waiting for it to get dark so I could give the trick-or-treaters a full-size candy bar, ones that I had bought to be the best neighbor ever, I picked up another one of Jim's notebooks. It was the last one that he'd ever made entries in. Now, the handwriting was terrible, and the sentences were fragmented. Still, I could get a decent idea about what he was talking about. More nonsense about hybrids, more trials with the Americum 241 fertilizer. There were drawings too, and not just diagrams, but like artistically rendered representations of his pumpkins and the imaginary hybrids. Some were actually pretty cool, like one of a scarecrow pumpkin riding an ostrich pumpkin. I mean, they're silly, yeah, but well drawn compared to his scrawled handwriting. The drawings tapered off as I got to the end of the notebook. One of the last pages before a series of blanks, there was a diagram. I held it up and I turned it around, trying to make out what it could be. And then it clicked. It was a map of the property. I saw the barn, the house, the greenhouse, but there was something there I didn't recognize, something in the middle of the field by the 3 scarecrows that had been there for what looked like decades. Still bored and now curious, I brought the map up to me with the field. Sure enough, at the center of the triangle formed by the scarecrows was a slight mound in the dirt. Easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. I kicked the dust around for a minute and saw a rope connected to a wooden hatch. I pulled it open, revealing a passage and a ladder anchored into the stone wall. I realized it had been probably a well at one point. I jogged back to the house, grabbed a flashlight. It was getting dark and I knew that it would be pitch black down there. I took care in climbing down the steps and reached the bottom after about 10 feet. Shallower than I thought. There was a narrow, low hallway with a dirt ceiling covered in the veiny stalactites of roots from the plants above. I stooped forward and brushed the roots out of my face, and trying to put out of my mind the thought of spiders as their webs struck me. My flashlight's beam illuminated another wooden door with a rope handle. I reached out, grabbed the handle, and pulled. It was stuck. I aimed the flashlight around the door and noticed a metal rod sticking out of the wall, blocking the door from opening. I yanked the rod out of the wall and tried the door again. It opened easily. The flashlight showed a small room about 5 feet by 5 feet. At first I thought that it was empty. When I stepped inside, however, there was something against the wall next to the doorway. It took me a minute to figure out what it was in the dim light of the flashlight, but when I finally understood what I was looking at, I gasped. The thing began to move. I stifled a scream as a creature the size of a man stood and stared at me, its veiny, whitish-orange skin covered in dust. It moaned. I made a move to run, but the thing blocked my path. Now I screamed. I tried to strike it with my flashlight, but I was dealt a heavy blow that sent me reeling. The last thing I saw before I lost consciousness was the thing walking out of the door and down the root-choked corridor. My blackout lasted the entire night. When I came to, I rolled around in pain and confusion. I was seeing double and was unbearably dizzy. I knew I had to have a concussion, but for the first couple of minutes I couldn't remember why. When it all came flooding back, a spell of panic pushed my dizziness aside, and I ran out of the room, climbed out of the chamber, and hauled myself into the daylight. The farm was filled with police and emergency vehicles. One of the officers saw me staggering toward them and called out to his partner. They approached me in time for me to collapse into their arms. I woke in the hospital sometime later. I was indeed concussed, and my skull was home to a fracture that could have killed me. There was commotion outside the door, and I pressed the button near the bed to alert a nurse. When one finally came, she looked haggard and upset. I asked what was going on, dismayed by the slur that I had in my speech. She sat on my bed, and without breaking eye contact, she told me what had happened, and why the hospital was full. I didn't believe her, so she turned on the local news. The anchor was talking about deaths in our town, the death of trick-or-treaters, the dead parents who tried to protect them, dead police officers who tried to intervene. The view changed to a charred and fractured area of the middle of Main Street. It looked like a bomb had gone off. The nurse turned off the TV. The nurse said no one knew how any of that happened, and some people were even doubting what they'd seen less than 24 hours ago. It was too surreal. A man-shaped creature with skin like a pumpkin screaming, "Where is my father?" while devastating any person they came near. But the evidence was there, especially in the victims. The dead were lucky, the living though. The living were traumatized beyond comprehension. While I thought my injury was bad, as more details of the events were relayed, I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was short-lived. Before she left to assist with another patient, the nurse said one thing under her breath. It was quiet and almost sounded like she didn't want to say it, but felt compelled to. I didn't get all of it, but what I heard was enough. Shattered hips and jaws and orifices stuffed with pumpkin seeds. This year's 13-day Halloween countdown is in support of Dark Places, Evil Faces, a new collection brought to you by PS Publishing and features New York Times bestsellers, some of horror's most prolific authors, and Vincent Venicava. Sales of the book Dark Places, Evil Faces goes to the Macmillan Cancer Support. It's a charity based out of the UK that gives aid to people and families suffering from cancer. So, this Halloween, I hope you all enjoy the stories, and I hope we can do some good in the world. Sweet dreams.